Donald Trump has waged a very public war against law enforcement and the prosecutors who have indicted him. He has targeted Fulton County DA Fani Willis, calling her a failed DA from Atlanta, where murders and crime soar. Willis says she has faced racist vitriol from Trump supporters in recent months. And yesterday, Trump used the word riggers in a Truth Social post berating Willis. Riggers, of course, rhymes with something else, and perhaps that was the point. Despite multiple orders not to, Trump has continued these attacks, and now there are real-life consequences. Today, a woman in Texas was arrested for allegedly threatening the federal judge overseeing the 2020 election case against Trump. Abigail Jo Schrei called Judge Tanya Chutkan, a woman of Jamaican descent, a stupid slave, repeatedly threatening to kill Judge Chutkan. You are in our sights. We want to kill you. If Trump doesn't get elected in 2024, we are coming to kill you, so tread lightly. She ended that statement with a word that rhymes with witch. She also used that word that rhymes with rigor. This comes days after the FBI fatally shot a Utah man who was threatening to kill both President Biden and Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. Joining me now to discuss all this is Michelle Goldberg, New York Times columnist and an MSNBC contributor. Michelle, it is so terribly distressing and so completely unsurprising that this is the sort of harvest of all the threats that Trump has made online. I mean, can we see this as anything other than a response or an extension of what Trump has been calling for on social media?
No, I mean, this has been the pattern throughout his presidency, right? I mean, you saw the entire time that he was in office, he would make these threats, and some of his more worshipful fans, you know, the person who sent mail bombs to Democrats and journalists and the like would try to act on them. And so, and, you know, and he's kind of warned over and over again that that's where these threats lead to, and it only leads him to escalate them. And what strikes me is just how, you know, people talk about kind of special treatment. He is being treated with such kid gloves. He is being treated so unlike any other criminal defendant in his position, in that there has been so far very little sanction for, you know, threats, witness intimidations, intimations. When you think about what's happening in Georgia, I mean, the Georgia's law on bail is, in my opinion, unreasonably strict in that you basically, it puts the burden of proof on the defendant to show that they don't pose a risk of witness tampering or obstruction of justice. I mean, there is no universe in which Donald Trump poses no risk of witness tampering or obstruction of justice, but I don't think anybody expects him to be held pending trial. You know, but at some point there has to be some sort of sanction, or he's just going to keep escalating.
Well, right. And I think it's actually really dangerous for him not to face some kind of sanction. The problem is what you're going to, I mean, honestly, the sanction, the fine isn't going to do it. Moving the trial date up and around seems very complicated and almost impossible in the Georgia case. So then what's left? Incarceration. And that is sort of widely dismissed as impossible. But if Trump doesn't face some kind of sort of sanction, then it's an implicit acceptance that Trump going to do what Trump going to do.
Right. No, I mean, I think it certainly has to be at least on the table. If you look at what happened with the E. Jean Carroll verdict, right? He gets, I believe, a $5 million verdict for defamation after he's held responsible for sexual assault. And basically the next day, he's back to defaming her all over again. So he's someone who's not going to be held in check by, and in fact, not only is he not going to be held in check, but seems to perceive any limits as a kind of dare and as a goad to double down on his aggression. And so, yeah, I hope that there is at least, I think we should stop talking about jail as unthinkable and, you know, and start saying that there's going to be a point, and maybe judges should be clear about where that point is, at which it will become inevitable.
Well, and I think it's not just because it's Donald Trump, it's also for the example that he sets to other would-be sort of people who exhibit threatening behavior. I have to recall the video we just played of Ronnie Jackson, a Republican congressman who's out there berating law enforcement, calling them many names under the sun, and then simultaneously, audaciously has the, you know, the chutzpah, I don't know what you would call it, that embraces the hypocrisy of saying he's someone that backs the blue, that he's the law and order guy.
And it's been going.
The fallacy of that line of that position is revealed so acutely in moments like this. And even though it is repetitive, I think it really bears mentioning this. When law enforcement comes for you, there's no backing the blue.
Well, I don't think that that's what backing the blue means.
Yes.
Right? I mean, backing the blue
it means
basically, right, backing the blue in the way that they tend to use that phrase means that the law should be a kind of Praetorian guard against a certain strata of people, and that it should be backed in doing whatever it needs to do to defend them and their property interests, right? It certainly doesn't mean law and order in the general sense or the global sense. Otherwise, the Republican Party would have been outraged over what happened to the Capitol Police on January 6th.
Well, and let's keep in mind the genesis of Back the Blue came out as a sort of collective conservative response to the Black Lives Matter movement. There is an implicit racial and racist thread that runs through this sort of confederacy of people.
Right. So the police they're not supposed to police them. The police are supposed to police those other people. And when the police end up policing, say, Donald Trump or Ronnie Jackson, they are kind of by this definition, stepping out of their proper role.
I do wonder, between January 6th and defund the FBI, whether law enforcement proper as an institution begins to break with the Republican Party if it continues to be headed by someone like Donald Trump, who himself is facing multiple criminal indictments, is deriding prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and is, accusing basically the Department of Justice of being a wing of the deep state. I mean, do you just think the institutional sort of desires of law enforcement are too closely aligned with the Republican Party to ever see a break, no matter how vitriolic the relationship gets?
Yes, I do.
You're like, full stop, it'll never happen.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, certainly, I'm sure it happens, at the higher levels of, for example, the FBI, the Justice Department, among some prosecutors. But no, I think that fundamentally there are plenty of, not all police, obviously, but I think plenty of police who also see that kind of back the blue definition of their role. Right, as to kind of protect the Donald Trumps of the world, as opposed to protect the world from Donald Trump.
I just wonder if the hypocrisy, if he's actually convicted, whether the Republican Party can truly say without even a glimmer of a smile on its face that it's truly the party of law and order.
Well, it hasn't been the party of law and order,
sure.
So, at least since Richard Nixon.
But the front runner of their party for the nomination may be a convict at one point.
Right. Well, the front runner he's charged with 91 felonies. He's been found guilty of sexual assault. Found responsible for sexual assault. His company is about to be tried for, I don't even remember offhand, but
there's a lot.
Right. For, kind of all kinds of layers of fraud. Nobody believes that Donald Trump is a rule follower, but he preserves a certain sort of hierarchy.
He sure does. Michelle Goldberg, no better person to just work ourselves up into a lather about this. Thank you for your time today, my friend.